Welcome back to the Investigator Discussion Series. I'm rather Incoherent, and this is Kōhaku. He's the most recent character I finished a campaign on now, and I've gotta say, I don't feel like I understand Kōhaku. I feel like I have a better opinion of Kōhaku than I did when I went into the campaign, but I also feel like I have more questions than answers, and I'm deeply uncomfortable trying to build a Kōhaku deck right now. So I'm going to talk about how my Kōhaku campaign went, how I understand the character, and what I would do in the next campaign, before ranking my current understanding, which feels deeply flawed, of Kōhaku. Let's get into it with the stat line. He has a 4 in head and a 1 in foot, which is atrocious for a Mystic. Generally with Mystics, you don't care about their proactive stats, their book, and their fist. You want to use your head to do pretty much everything, and you want to use your foot as a Mythos defense stat. 5 out of 12 of his stat points are in the stats that other Mystics care about, which is not a good thing. This 4 book is workable, and it feels to me like Kōhaku really wants to try to make use of this book, because there are tools to do it, especially with his card pool, things that were printed alongside him to use his book. The 3 in fist, I suppose you add that to Spectral Razor, but other than that, again, I don't really feel like he's a great user of Dragon Pull at all. The 3 in fist doesn't really have the outlying support that other characters like a Dexter might have to make Dragon Pull a good main weapon, or an Akachi, and I end up feeling like his stat line is just atrociously balanced, and it's trying to force me to use book, and it feels a lot like Sister Amina, where the character was pretending it didn't want to use head and just digging a hole for itself. His soak is 6/8, which as always is good in a post in the thick of it world that's just basically the same soak everyone has. His ability is definitely good though. Reaction at the start of your turn, either add a bless or a curse, whichever there are fewer of. If it's a tie, you choose. Or remove 2 bless and 2 curse tokens from the bag to take an additional action at this turn. So that's just a really good ability. If you're able to put enough tokens in the bag to use the second part, you're up an action, provided no one really wanted those tokens, which is debatable. And then outside of that, if you're just playing good curse cards like Deep Knowledge and Faustian Bargain, it's not too hard to drip feed curses in the bag, keep curses above blesses, and have your ability just be Sister Mary's ability on a different timing window, with the possibility of having some pretty big tempo plays through the second half. So I do think his ability is just kind of obviously a good ability. His star is also good in conjunction with that ability. It is +2, add a bless and a curse through the chaos bag, so it's directly feeding into what you want to do, which is have tokens in the bag that you can turn into actions or use with the cards in your deck. What is that deck, by the way? It is deck size 30, bless 0 to 5, curse 0 to 5, occult 0, mystic 0 to 3. So the big thing here is you get access to every single bless and curse card in the game, but you do not get access to all of the mystic spells. You also get some random occult cards, which is sort of a, well, eclectic bunch of cards that don't have much of a common theme to them. And let's get into his signature, because it's also a pretty big part of the Kōhaku puzzle, or at least it felt like it to me before I stopped believing I understood Kōhaku halfway through the campaign. Book of Living Myths is a 2-cost hand asset, commits for good things, you don't want to commit it. Reaction, when a chaos token would be revealed at your location, exhaust Book of Myths, search the chaos bag for a bless or curse, whichever there are more of, choose an tie, and resolve it instead. So if you have this in play, and there are no curse tokens in the bag, but there are bless tokens, this is unlimited Favor of the Sun. Vice versa for Favor of the Moon. Kōhaku's often balancing the bag back and forth between both, so it's not quite as good as Favor of the Sun, because even if you're playing primarily Bless Kōhaku, occasionally you'll dig out blesses faster than you dig out curses, and you'll end up with more curses than blesses by a lot, and it won't be Favor of the Sun for a couple of turns. But in general, anything that wants you to pull blesses or curses is made tremendously better by this, and this one signature item asset essentially replaces one of the core combo pieces of Bless and Curse decks in Favor of the Sun and Favor of the Moon. At least that's how I felt before I started playing. Also, before I started playing, I was very, very afraid of Weeping Yurei. It's a 2/2/2 enemy, not that bad, but it does hit for 2 horror, which is quite bad. It's aloof, elusive hunter, so it's going to follow you around, it's not going to engage with you, and then if anyone does anything to it, or vice versa, and it survives, it's going to run away and exhaust. It's only going to follow Kōhaku, however, its effect will trigger on anyone at its location. After an investigator reveals a bless or curse token during a skill test at Weeping Yurei's location, if it is ready, Weeping Yurei attacks that investigator, limit once per test. Now, when I first saw this, I thought this would be like kind of a pain in the ass to deal with, because like sure, it just dies to Spectral Razor, but it would attack you if you Spectral Razor it and pull a bless or a curse, which you would oftentimes want to use like Book of Living Myths on a Spectral Razor 2 to get it back, so you'd still take the 2 horror dealing with it, which is kind of a pain in the ass. Like a weakness that says lose an action, 2 horror soak, and 2 resources is actually kind of an irritating weakness, and that assumes we have all the tools you need to deal with it at no additional cost. And I can see how this thing should be scary. However, consistently over the course of our Hemlock Vale campaign, we found that Weeping Yurei just wasn't a problem. Oftentimes there was a fighter or a flex at the location who just engage it, attack it, and kill it, because its stats are fairly low. Additionally, there were like half the scenarios where it was dealt with no problem, but the other half, we just let it follow us around. Sometimes it hit us once, ran away, exhausted, and never caught up to us again. We consistently found that Weeping Yurei just wasn't really something we had to deal with, and it sort of dealt 2 horror to some people sometimes. It never really dealt more than 2 horror, never really was that bad to deal with. I feel like this reads a lot worse on paper than it does in actual play. So coming over to the Kōhaku deck I finished Hemlock Vale with, I was playing pretty much Curse Kōhaku in a Blessed team, and the point of that is to get Key of Solomon onto the team and play Curse Kōhaku. I don't really know that you would ever want to have a full Curse team. I don't see the appeal. And outside of Kōhaku, specifically with Book of Living Myths for unlimited guaranteed triggers on a Rod of Carnamagos during an Armageddon attack, I'm really not seeing the appeal of Curse decks in general. Curse just doesn't feel like it's there in the same way that Bless is. But Kōhaku came with a lot of support that really pushes you to want to play a Curse Kōhaku. Specifically, it was printed alongside Gabriel Carrillo, literally lovers in the backstory, right? This character was printed to be played alongside Gabriel Carrillo. It is the story of these cards. He's going to boost your book to 5, and reaction, add a curse to draw a card, which very oftentimes, if you had more blesses than curses, it's just add 1 curse and 1 bless because you're going to counterbalance it with your own ability. So this is really good, especially in Curse Kōhaku when you want the curses. He was also printed alongside Prismatic Spectacles, which is a way to not just generate curses, that's not inherently good, but to get a lot of clues with Book. You test with Book, you get +2, bringing you to 7. If you get a curse, then you get 2 clues. I personally don't think Prismatic Spectacles is good in a vacuum, because if you're testing at 7, like I just established, then when you get the curse, you get down to 5, and 5 against Shroud for 2 clues is actually pretty shit in a lot of circumstances, right? You'd want to be 6, 7, 8, depending on what the bag looks like, what the Shroud is, right? If you're at a 2 Shroud location with an easy bag, great. If you're at a 4 Shroud location and all the symbols are worse than -2, it's horrible. So you really want more than just Prismatic Spectacles, which is why we're running Blasphemous Covenant, right? That way we can force the curse token with our Book of Living Myths, turn it into a +1 instead, and now instead of testing at 5 for 2 clues, we're testing at 8 for 2 clues, and that is tremendously more viable. And that was the core of what I wanted to build into and around for Curse Kōhaku. I'm playing Flex because I also really wanted to try out Rod of Carnamagos, specifically the interaction where if you use Rod of Carnamagos during the Lightning Bolt window on Armageddon, because you're revealing those curses during an Armageddon skill test, it triggers Armageddon, getting you more charges on Armageddon, more damage on any enemy at your location, not even necessarily the ones you're attacking. It's a really strong combo, theoretically. My experience was that multiple times I had like literally filled bag, 10 curses, and I would tap Rod of Carnamagos and I would get the 1 curse from Book of Living Myths and nothing else. I feel like I had a distinctly below average game with Kōhaku and my curse synergies where it was basically Book of Living Myths and then nothing else pulling curses no matter how many I put in the bag. And that is to some degree just a weakness of these types of cards. Their output is tremendously more random than other cards. You don't have to do a bunch of bullshit for Azure Flame to deal its 3rd damage. I don't know that Armageddon Rod of Carnamagos is bad, but holy shit, my experience playing these cards is the most frustrating thing in the world in this campaign. I will say that of the 2, Rod of Carnamagos tremendously surprised me. Armageddon is definitely not the strong part of this combo, it's entirely the Rod. The ability to Lightning Bolt, pick an enemy anywhere on the map, and essentially kill them with Rod of Carnamagos is insane. And we will have to talk about Rod of Carnamagos because some people might be like, what in the hell is the Rod of Carmangos? What are you talking about? Which is fair, that's how I felt before I started really looking into optimizing Kōhaku and remembering that this card existed. It is a 2-cost, 2-experience hand asset. Lightning Bolt, choose a non-elite enemy at any location and exhaust the Rod, reveal 5 random Chaos tokens from the Chaos bag. That is a trigger you can use Book of Living Myths on, it does not require a skill test. For each curse token revealed, you may search your bonded cards for a rot event and attach it to that enemy. There are, as you can see on the edge here, 5 rots. I won't be covering the other 3 rots, but I will be covering the 2 rots that are actually tremendously impactful. The other 3 rots are between basically doesn't exist and kind of nice, right? They're not big deals. The first 2 rots, however, are very important. Attached enemy cannot move. If you have an elusive enemy that's run off somewhere else, if you have an enemy that someone's tripped, you can just hit it with the Rod, give it this rot, and it doesn't exist anymore. You just never go back to its location, problem solved. There's also the Abyssal Rot. The attached enemy cannot attack, just period. You can't attack with normal attacks, with opportunity attacks, with anything. So this functionally just kills the enemy as long as it's not gonna be targeted by any sorts of Mythos cards. And again, this is insane. As an example, in The Longest Night, the ability to just cross-map target a 3 health enemy that takes 1 damage at a time and tell it that it's never hitting anything or it's never going to move. Basically, killing the enemy is really valuable. And sure, it's at its best in that scenario, but in every scenario, the Rod of Carnimagos actually felt like it was doing a lot. And then in every scenario, when I was using Armageddon with the Rod of Carnimagos, it felt like Armageddon was horribly undertuned. The fact that this cost 4 experience requires you to pull a curse token to do anything, basically, and only gives you +2 head, which puts you at flat 0 when you pull a curse token, right? This is so unimpressive. It was hard carried by the Rod and would have been basically unusable without it. Even with it, I was deeply frustrated every time I was testing the Rod and wished I was using any other method of enemy management. So now that I've gone over the curse package, let's go over the blurs package. It's pretty straightforward. If there's more curses in the bag, then I can add blesses to my ability as Kōhaku. My teammates were a Sister Miri and a Parallel Mateo, which means there's a lot of blesses in the bag. Several times we found ourselves with 10 of both tokens in the bag towards the end of scenarios, and that means it's possible to use Key of Solomon as an incredible healing card. One of the big sales pitches for Kōhaku is that he's one of the mystics who more easily enables a Key of Solomon. If no one on the team is playing Curse or Bless, Key of Solomon is probably just going to be an insane healing card in Kōhaku because you keep choosing to add the Bless and then burn it for healing, right? That's the entirety of what makes this deck blurs, the teammates and the Key of Solomon. But I've got to say, I was far more impressed by Key of Solomon than the Nightmare of the Curse package, where Prismatic Spectacles basically required the Blasphemous Covenant to do its job. And then the whole fight package, like there was some cool niche stuff going on with Rod of Carnimagos that did genuinely feel strong. But then when I had to actually kill a guy with Armageddon, it felt terrible. What I found, to my enormous surprise, to be the strongest part of Kōhaku wasn't any of this shit. I thought Key of Solomon would be like the bee's knees and like really impress me. It was good. Actually not crazy impressed by it in this run. And that's probably in part just due to the fact that like I was putting so many curses in the bag that I kept interrupting my own healing. No, the thing that was most impressive with this deck for me was actually running 2 Scroll of Secrets, 2 Deep Knowledge, in a deck that has Gabriel Carrillo. I got lucky and regularly drew Gabriel Carrillo on my opening turn. I'm not a seeker. My cards aren't fast. If I draw an extra card every turn for the entire game, I really can't use Scroll of Secrets and Deep Knowledge on myself. Also, this deck felt surprisingly cheap, meaning this Faustian bargain was mostly overkill. So I consistently found myself actually playing a really strong support character where I get Gabriel out, he starts feeding me cards, and I use Scroll of Secrets and Deep Knowledge and Faustian bargain on my teammates, and pumping a ton of cards and resources into a Parallel Father Mateo is a great thing to do with your time. It could be valuable in anyone, obviously. It doesn't need to be one of the best characters in the game. But the best part of this deck is actually that Gabriel gives you the room to use your draw that normally would be important for you on your teammates instead, and lets Kōhaku actually play a kind of impressive flex deck where he's supporting his team a lot. Additionally, Spectral Razor level 2, when you can guarantee the recursion, just really damn good. Incredible method of flex fighting. So this stuff on the left that I like really thought about and looked at decks on Arkham DB and decided to try out this package, I can't endorse this. I think it's cool. I wouldn't tell you not to play it, but like from a power perspective, I've never felt like I was flipping coins to determine how effective I was more in my life, and I am fucking terrible at flipping coins, it turns out. Moving on, I feel the need to acknowledge this is a 51 experience deck. Coming down to a 35 experience core, this sort of shows off why I dislike the deck to some degree. A lot of this campaign I spent with base Armageddon. There's just not like anything in the deck that's optional. E-Cash really shouldn't be upgrading this. We should be at 31 experience, at which point I'd probably be upgrading Armageddon. This is inaccurate. Don't worry about that. But the rest of this, Spectral Razors, way more important than Armageddon. Key of Solomon, the healing's way better. Rod of Carnimagos was basically necessary for Armageddon to be usable anyway. Prismatic Spectacles and Gabriel are just cheaper than Armageddon and give me more bang for my buck. Backpack is needed to find the Book of Living Myths and all this other shit that I care about doing anyway. Also, just feel the need to mention, Backpack's great in this deck. You have all these hand slots that are incredibly valuable, and the Spectacles, and the E-Cash for economy, just fantastic backpack. And I will mention this is a 3 hand slot deck with the Cult Reliquary. The Reliquary is very important because you need it to hold Book of Living Myths, Rod of Carnimagos, and Key of Solomon. Try not to play all of them before you get out your second Scroll of Secrets, but you know, sometimes you're not able to make that decision. So the core of the deck doesn't even include upgrading the Armageddon. There's just too many things I care about spending, and when you put Key of Solomon into the Blessed deck, you just fuck everything up and the experience curve goes out the window and I create a nightmare for myself. Coming down to a level 0 deck for that core, I would start with 2 copies of Gabriel Carrillo. This is just an incredibly powerful card when it's in your opening hand. You could get like 1 backpack. There's still a good backpack before you've gotten all the upgrades you really care about. But Gabriel's just so insanely valuable. You feel like you're playing a much better character when you can just investigate at 5 and you have all the cards in the world. In terms of upgrade path, that's a bitch and a half. You need everything. It's brutal. Talk to your team. What does your team need? If your team desperately needs fighting, this is probably completely wrong. You probably go for Armageddon earlier. My team didn't really need fighting that badly. I found myself going for a relatively early rod, at least one of them, because the level 0 rod, where it is getting a random rod, is basically completely useless. After that, I went into upgraded backpacks and Blasphemous Covenant, then Prismatic Spectacles and Key of Solomon, not quite sure the order. But like really, I can't even give you a good upgrade path for this deck, because my conclusion with this deck is you need all the shit in this 51 experience deck, which means it's a bad deck plan. Because when you look at what I would call a core, we're at 30 experience with unupgraded Armageddons, and that's a problem that no upgrade path will ever solve. So my conclusion when I look at all of that is instead to make a deck plan something akin to this. I'm not going to talk too specifically about this because I'm going to leave this as an open question for people to tell me what I'm missing with Kōhaku. I can't give a clear upgrade path for a deck I haven't played yet. I will give a vague suggestion. I would play Bless Kōhaku. Putting curses in the deck made Key of Solomon weaker. Key of Solomon seems like it is the strongest thing I was doing. Additionally, the best part of Curse was that Curse cards like Deep Knowledge and Falsian Bargain could be played as team support. And playing these also made it easier to put blesses in the bag with my ability, making my ability cheaper. Same with Gabriel getting me up to 5 book and let me investigate that way. The best thing I was doing for fighting by far was Spectral Razor with Kōhaku's ability with Book of Living Mist, right? So I don't feel like I want to rely on anything else. I want to play high draw, I want to get Spectral Razor, I want to recur it. That's my game plan. I would play a flex deck leaned heavily towards clue finding, and this hurts me, but I wouldn't run Prismatic Spectacles, I wouldn't run the Armageddon and the Erotic Heart of Magos. I would just run the level 2 and 3 clue finding Mystic cards. And that hurts my soul. That feels like a giving up on the character. To just say, fuck Blurs, fuck Curse, I can't do it. But after dragging myself through a campaign with those cards, I just consistently felt like the Curse tokens hurt everyone but me. They weren't even great for me. I'd have been better off just like having reliable numbers that don't want me to draw Curse tokens on them. And then I could have Ancient Covenant instead of keeping the curses in the bag to continue griefing my team. So if I wanted to play Kōhaku in the future, I would plan for a deck like this. And while this deck is also a 46 experience deck, a lot of this isn't necessary experience. I realized that I'm at too much experience, so I made some adjustments to bring it down to 30 experience. Guts is no longer upgraded, and I took out the upgraded read the signs. I genuinely think that as a flex character with 5 book, once Gabriel's in play, and Clairvoyance and Rite of Seeking, you really don't need the read the signs. I'd rather have Holy Rosary for the plus head for these, especially at level 0, and for the Horror Soak, which my deck otherwise has none of. I just realized I'm also missing Arcane Research, which is almost definitely worth it when you're planning on upgrading Key of Solomon immediately, which would be the upgrade path for this deck. I think if I'm playing Bless Kōhaku, I'm on my team to provide healing with Key of Solomon. That is part of the sales pitch of the character in my mind. So I would be going for Key of Solomon immediately, making me comfortable to start with Arcane Researches in addition to In the Thick of It, and knowing they'll be going for upgrades to my healing pretty immediately. I would still be using my In the Thick of It to start with Gabriel Carrillo, and after I got my Keys of Solomon, depending on the team, I'd either go into Spectral Razor immediately for fighting if my team needs help with that, Backpacks if I don't have to help with fighting, and then after that, Clairvoyance and Rite of Seeking. And I do think that there's probably a lot of merit to a character build like this. I think all the curse stuff is too random, too finicky, griefs your team way too hard. I don't think the curse stuff had a home, and if it does have a home, this is not the home for it. This is wrong. So if you feel like you have a better interpretation of a curse or Bless Kōhaku, I'm all ears. As for Bless Kōhaku, maybe there's more to it that I can commit to it than this. I genuinely really like the plan of bare minimum bless, using just your ability to get the blesses you need for Key of Solomon, and not really worrying about it too much beyond Book of Living Mist, Key of Solomon, Ancient Covenant, and playing team support with the incredibly powerful support cards you get from the curse access. I'll also mention, I just haven't covered it yet, Tempt Fate, kind of absolutely insane card in Kōhaku. It should be in every single Kōhaku deck. It is a 0-cost fast card that draws a card, gives you an action, and adds 1 curse, 1 bless to the back, because you just use your ability to eat the tokens it puts in. It is insane in Kōhaku, and it should be in every Kōhaku deck. Which brings us to the tier list. And until the end of the campaign, I had Kōhaku above Stella and Preston, but after dragging myself halfway through Fate of the Veil, that's as far as I could get my table through that scenario, before they saw the Hemlock map come down again and said, oh no, I'm disconnecting, and everyone left the group. I don't like Fate of the Veil, but my table hates it even more than I do. It is not a popular scenario. But in the first half of Fate of the Veil that they could actually make themselves play, during which I was Kōhaku for most of that, I cannot overstate how incredibly weak Kōhaku felt when you are playing a scenario where the bag is hard and you are relying on curse tokens. Kōhaku feels pretty much fine for most of the campaign for me, because the bag wasn't that bad for most of Hemlock Vale. But the moment that I started being like up 2 on a 3-shroud location and half the bag was a -3 or more, I just began to feel completely unusable. Especially when the goal of that scenario is to over succeed in a big way and my character is completely incapable of doing it. But typically I find when a scenario poses a specific question and my character simply cannot answer it, the character is doing something very weak or has been misbuilt in some way. It's not necessarily the character, it's entirely possible for it to be plotted a mistake. But the entirety of the campaign up until the finale playing Kōhaku, I had this lingering feeling that I've mentioned this with Dark Horse Preston, that I'm like consistently taking tests up 2, up 3, and when the bag is nice to me, I'm on top of the world. I'm actually an insane character. But there's like a solid 1 out of 3 chance that I just don't do anything every action. And that's how Kōhaku felt to me. Where once I had Prismatic Spectacles, sure, I could guarantee 2 clues on my first action, probably. I'd still be like up 4 with a million curses in the bag, right? But like beyond that, I was basically running on fumes. The best thing I did by far was heal my team and support my team, and all the stuff involving curses just ultimately felt like a massive negative, not only to my team, but even to my own deck. Now I will say, the sheer amount of team support Kōhaku does have from adding blesses to the bag for his teammates, from being able to feed them Deep Knowledge, Scroll of Secrets, and Faustian Bargain relatively easily if you get an opening Gabriel, these things actually do matter in a big way. This is a lot of valuable team support, and what he's doing isn't actually as weak as I'm making it sound. It's just deeply frustrating that like you have to attack with Armageddon, then you tap Rod of Carnimagos, and you see whether or not you're going to attack for 2 damage or 7, and usually it's really fucking close to 2. I think my average Armageddon hit with like 5 curses in the bag and a Rod of Carnimagos was like 3.2 with Book of Living Mist. It was terrible. So a lot of it was bad RNG, but some amount of my cynicism right now is that like when a different Mystic uses a Shriveling, it just deals 3 damage. They don't have to use their signature asset with previous setup to force certain results and then tap Blasphemous Covenant so that they can maybe pass the test. They just get +3 head, bringing it into base 8 because we're talking about a 5-head Mystic when we're comparing him to someone better than him to prove a point. And it's like, yeah, I compare Shriveling on like an Agnes Baker to trying to make Armageddon work on Kōhaku, and it feels like there is multiple tiers between these characters. Key of Solomon's very good. The support package that you're sort of accidentally running Kōhaku, I had no intention of playing Kōhaku as a support when this campaign started, but just accidentally building a support character was really cool. And the support and the healing was all really, really powerful. And the stuff I was doing did function. Spectral Razor Recursion in specific is just good. So like maybe Kōhaku still deserves to be up here at the bottom of B, or even still like above Stella and Preston. I'll put him at the bottom of B for now, because I think genuinely, I just had a terrible, terrible time with bad curse RNG, and the non-curse Kōhakus are going to be better. It's like if there was a rogue gun that was 21 or bust, right? The card where you play blackjack to make money. Every time I tried to flex and fight enemies, I was playing 21 or bust, and I'm a fucking fiend for consistency. The fact that I'm even willing to put him in B tier is me being nice. I cannot regret more having played him the way I played him. I'm glad I gave Rod of Carnimagos a chance. It is genuinely a good card, but the thing it synergizes with is not nearly as good as it is. Rod of Carnimagos would be one of the craziest things in the game if Curse Mystic was actually a strong deck. As it stands, it makes Curse Mystic playable, which is cool. I'm glad that exists and the package works, but I could not be more just opposed to the way the deck plays than I am. And I did not realize that going in. I did not look at it and understand that this would be infinitely more random than playing a shotgun deck, for instance. I should justify why I have him where I do on the list, and that really does come down to that, like, despite me focusing a lot of this review on disliking Armageddon and Curse as an archetype, and feeling there is too much reliance on too many moving pieces and prismatic spectacles, and I just shut up the back and grief the whole team, like, those are a lot of problems I have with Curse. There are a lot of individually strong things happening in Kōhaku that add up to be a very powerful character, in spite of the fact that I built into this thing that I now view as a horrible trap that I don't like playing. And to specifically go through all the stuff that is just transparently strong, Key of Solomon is the best healing card in the game. Since it's not cross-map and I'm playing a flex character, you can argue that it's not just like transparently the best, it's definitely in contention for it. The Book of Living Mist combined with Rod of Carnimagos allows you to just cross-map zap a guy and turn him off, basically. the ability to functionally kill enemies that aren't even near you as a lightning bolt is absolutely wild and hard carries the curse archetype. Spectral Razor with the Book of Living Myths is absolutely stupidly powerful. Just every turn, free engage, 3 damage, base 7 with nothing else buffing it. Spectral Razor, guaranteed recursion, is incredibly strong. Easily one of the best things the deck is doing. Gabriel Carrillo giving you 5 book just means if you're at a 3 shroud or lower location, you can probably just dig in the bag and help your team in a meaningful way. He also means that you're going to have all the cards you could possibly need, freeing you up to play pretty much all the best support cards in the game, and I do mean that. Like, I'm sure there are good support cards that aren't in this list, but look at this list. We have Deep Knowledge, the best draw you can share with your team, Faustian Bargain, the best economy you can draw with your team, Warded Protection, the best Mythos negation you can share with your team, Guts level 2, and Promise of Power, 2 of the best skills you can give to your teammates. It's straight up a third of the deck. I did not plan to do this. I just accidentally put in a bunch of good cards that all went to my teammates. It's like the first time I played a Seeker and realized that was the best support class all over again. So Kōhaku has a lot of individually strong stuff going on. And while this review has been extraordinarily focused on how much Armageddon failed me and the fact that I think Armageddon and Mag Spectacles cannot be the best Kōhaku, I think Kōhaku does easily earn a B tier. I think he easily outperforms characters like Tommy, Hank, Vincent. I'm not mentioning Joe because Joe still, whoops, all Joes hasn't happened. My table's being wishy-washy and doesn't want to do it. And like Leo, Patrice, Silas, we're gonna get to them in a couple of days. They might all jump up like half a tier or stay right where they are. I don't know why I'm having writer's block on even thinking about these 3 characters, but I feel much more comfortable playing Kōhaku over someone like a Carolyn or Alessandra. I feel like Kōhaku does more for his role than an Alessandra and is better team support than a Carolyn. I think Kōhaku is genuinely a strong investigator, and when I try to put him in C tier, I feel like it's my negative bias towards the deck I built and not Kōhaku in any way being weak. I think a lot of the flaws I had with Kōhaku are shared in Preston. I'm gonna put him back where I originally had him, above Stella. I think so much of me dropping Kōhaku like 4 ranks since the last time I had him moving up in my tier list was just because of how much I personally dislike Armageddon Rod as a playstyle. And I don't think it's a strong playstyle. I do think it functions. I think you can beat campaigns with it. I know because I did, but like, boy howdy was that a mistake. That sort of shit's never going in my text again. That is not what I enjoy out of Arkham. Anyway, let's wrap it up. If you made it this far, then thank you for your time. Please do hit all the buttons to make the algorithm happy. If you know something about Kōhaku that I don't, let me hear it. I would love to play Kōhaku again someday in a deck that doesn't run Armageddon. Even if you think Armageddon's better than I'm giving it credit for, I refuse to play it ever again. And before I leave, a massive thank you to everyone who supports this channel, both the patrons over on Patreon and the channel members here on YouTube. I'll see all of you in the next one.